Hi, everybody. This is AJ Ali back for another session of Profiles of Love. And today I'm here with Dr. Edwin Nichols. How are you doing, Dr. Nichols?
Fine, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's so good to see you again. I'm going to just read a little intro and then we'll get rolling. For all of you, Dr. Nichols and I met during a session that he taught during the Be Me Community Social Determinants of Health Fellowship. That gathering in particular was in Washington, D.C. And I've got to say, I learned more from him in that session than I learned from probably all my instructors on those topics in all of my schooling, in all of my years combined. He's a truly extraordinary man. I'm going to read his short bio, and then we'll get into the Profiles of Love segment. Edwin J. Nichols, Ph.D., is the director of Nichols and Associates Incorporated, an applied behavioral science firm affecting technology transfer to organizations based on principles of philosophy, basic and behavioral science. Dr. Nichols developed the philosophical aspects of cultural difference, which articulates the essence of ethnic difference from the philosophical disciplines of axiology, epistemology, and logic. N&A makes assessments and evaluations of corporate structures, systems, staff, and management. The alignment of these forces affects systemic congruence in organizational structure. Cultural competence and leadership fully utilizes their multi-ethnic, pluralistic, and linguistically diverse workforce. The 21st century workforce is team-oriented, which is the value added. It restores the competitive edge and increases the market share. Now that's a little about what he does, and now we're going to get into who he is.
Okay.
Dr. Nichols, I'm so looking forward to this. This comes on the heels of me interviewing uh, Jane Elliott, famous for the blue eyes, brown eyes
Yeah.
experiment.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
so hers is up, and she's a dear friend as well. So I'm in great company with you, and we're going to get started. We're going to go through four letters that make up love, and the first is learn. And so we're going to learn a little bit about you. Love is the answer. Uh, the love is learn about people, open your hearts to their needs, volunteer to be part of the solution in their life, and empower others to do the same. So we're going to learn about you. Edwin, what are some fun facts about you that might surprise people, like likes, dislikes, weird habits, fears, secret superpower? Let it all out.
Okay. Well, in terms of likes, my children always tell me that Queen Victoria is dead, but I don't believe that because I practice in my home formal dinner parties with a minimum of 6 courses, all the proper china, crystal linens, everything is right to the letter, just as though Queen Victoria herself were going to step through the door and have dinner. So these are the crazy parts about me, okay?
Oh, that's awesome.
And pardon?
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, I'm very happy with that period. That was my period in terms of lifestyle and the kindnesses that went with politeness that went with the society.
Hmm.
Now, in terms of my dislikes, it's when public figures make grammatical errors in school, in college, on radio, on television. I just cringe when I hear them. And my mother-in-law would practically collapse when she heard them. So it's, and what's very interesting is I told you my grandson, um, well, I didn't tell you, but my grandson is coming here from China for the first time to go to school.
Okay.
And he's 8 years old. And the school to which he goes, elementary school, is predominantly Black, or at least one third Black, one third Hispanic, and then other. And so he said, Grandpa, IB. I collapsed on the
Oh.
floor. So we have to work very hard to make sure that he doesn't incorporate. So that's some of the craziness. Now, my secret power comes from the fact that I attend daily mass at 6:30 in the morning.
Hmm.
I'm one of those old Catholics that get up very early in the morning and go to mass because that starts my day.
Wow. So you
Church
actually, you wait a minute, you get up, you get dressed, and you leave your house to go to mass every single day?
at Monday through Friday at for the mass starts at 6:30.
Wow. So what time do you get up in the morning?
I get up around 5:30 and I was in the army, so 5 o'clock, it's more than enough time to 5:30 rather is enough time to do all the things you have to do to get ready. If you can't get ready in half an hour, something's wrong.
Yeah, that's true. I admire that dedication.
Now we were talking about open, okay?
Oh, wait, before we go on to that, let me ask you one more thing.
Sure.
What's your secret superpower?
Well, that's it. The daily mass. That's my
That's it.
superpower.
Okay, okay, okay. Sorry, I missed that. So see to wow, just getting all right, just getting up at 5:30 in the morning, to me, that's a superpower. See, I was in the Air Force. We didn't have to get up till 6:30.
Oh, I see.
All right.
Half the day's gone by that time.
Well, see, our planes were a little faster than your vehicles, so
Yes,
we could
yes.
afford to sleep a little bit more. So as far as open, the second letter in love, what's the most challenging thing you've ever experienced, and how did you deal with it, and what did you learn from that experience?
Okay, finally, I the realization that the United States is not a meritocracy and how it affected my son. Historically, whites want some fields of study exclusively for themselves. In 1955, industrial psychology and clinical psychology were the fields that were to be exclusively, or as close to exclusively as you could get it, for whites because they represented a good income. Terminal masters in industrial gave you a very good income.
Mhm.
And the clinical practice gave you a terrific income. So how then do they manage keeping you out? In the northern schools, like University of Michigan, Michigan State, those sorts of schools, um, Boston University at Amherst and so on, what they do is they put a roadblock or they accept you into a program. There are two processes. One, I experienced for industrial psychology. The requirement was it's a 2-year program, and 1 year you spend working in a factory to improve its output, productivity, and all these things.
Mhm.
When you graduate, they generally ask you to come and be a junior vice president in their company, and they give you stock. So when I applied, you have to do the 1-year practicum. Now, the list for Michigan was from the ceiling to the floor of
Mhm.
all these companies screaming for someone to come and work for them. Semicolon, however, comma, none of the companies would give Black Nichols the practicum.
Hmm.
And instead of the university saying, we will find one, we'll create one, something, they said it would be unfair for us to accept you into the program, realizing you could not fulfill the requirements for graduation.
Hmm.
So don't enter. You see? Now that was one technique. Another technique, um, we had a lot of young men coming through Morehouse for psychology. And the University of Massachusetts at Amherst were screaming for Blacks because their contracts were contingent on having Blacks in the program.
Okay.
Now, these are top scores on any measure that you have. They're in the 99th percentile. So it's not like you're, an affirmative, we'll let you in kind of thing. These are qualified people.
Yeah.
What they did was they gave them a terminal master's degree in clinical. Then they transferred them to the College of Education to get an EDD, that is a Doctor of Education in counseling or in mental health administration. So you see, that blocked them from having the full PhD in clinical psychology.
Hmm.
At that time, you couldn't declare yourself to be a clinician unless you had gone through the whole program. But I was working at the National Institute of Mental Health at that time, and I knew there was another vehicle. So what I did for several of these young men was to secure for them a one-year practicum at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, which at that time had a top rating.
Okay.
And then they could qualify as clinical psychologists and earn the money and fill out the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the kinds of things that I wanted to share with you. Now, what happened in my situation, my parents sent me to study at Tübingen University in Germany under Professor Ernst Kretschmer. Ernst Kretschmer had his private contracts with Mercedes-Benz and Zeiss Icon Camera Company
Okay.
in Stuttgart. So to have done a practicum at Mercedes-Benz and Zeiss Icon was not slouch practica.
Hmm.
So not only did I get a better one by going overseas, but I got two better ones, not
Hmm.
just one. Okay. Now, when I came back, I was still Black, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But needless to say, I didn't get a job. Okay. But I'll share that with you in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But what is very important is that that's 1955.
Okay.
And literally 20 years later, I was a visiting professor at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, and an Igbo Ph.D. in organization development from Michigan State University was coming through seeking a job. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked, and I asked him, I said, well, how did you do your practicum? This is now 20 years later. He said, I couldn't get anyone to give me the practicum, but I kept into the coursework. My classmate graduated, and the next year he said, come and do your practicum in my company. Is that interesting, or is it 20 years, literally 20 years
Yeah.
later? Okay.
Wow.
Now let's go back to I told you 1955, I went to Europe, 1957, I'm now back for a job.
Okay.
I'm in my home state of Michigan, and General Motors Institute of Technology in Flint, Michigan advertised in the American Psychological Association employment bulletin for an industrial psychologist.
Okay.
Well, at that time, you mailed papers. So I put papers together, photocopies, and mailed them. And the man got on the phone and he was all excited. Oh, come, right away. And well, I'm not identifiable as Black on the phone.
Hmm.
And when I arrived, he was rather startled because
Hmm.
the papers, if you just read them, my undergraduate is at Assumption College in Canada, which is a Catholic men's college at that time,
Mm-hmm.
Tübingen University in Germany. So he's looking for someone else other than who arrives. And here's what he does. He looks for my papers, everything, and he makes a decision that he would contact me, but the papers got lost.
Hmm.
Okay. So in the meantime, I accept another position as a clinical psychologist at the Illinois State Training School for Boys in St. Charles, Illinois. So now here's Flint, Michigan, and I'm miles away in Illinois. Someone rediscovers the papers, all ecstatic. Now look how much tracking they had to do, because we have to remember this is just handheld telephones.
Right.
They go through the number, they call my mother and get her to give information about where I am. They write me and tell me come immediately, and they'll pay for my per diem. So I drive my car from Illinois to Flint, and I go in, we have the interview, they're all excited. Then with my per diem check, a month later, there's a note saying that unfortunately, they couldn't hire me at this time because they didn't have office space.
Mm. Wow.
Okay. Now,
That's one I've not heard before.
okay, okay.
Wow.
Well, it comes to my mind that, you really need a PhD. You have to have the PhD. So through the Austrian Ministry of Education, I become a fellow with a full scholarship to study at Innsbruck in Austria. It's not where you study, it's more under whom you study. So the principal person under whom I wanted to study in Germany was Kretschmer, and under Kohler in Austria. That's where I wanted to study. Could study in Vienna, but the man at Vienna was not as important as the man at Innsbruck. You
Mm.
see?
Okay.
Oh, that's what I did. All right. Now, um, I go to Austria. I get my PhD, cum laude. My dissertation is hand typed on a hand machine with 5 carbons in German
Wow.
by yours truly. Okay, you getting the picture? All
Mm-hmm.
right. I get my cum laude and I come back home. All right. At this time, this is now 1961, General Motors is again looking for someone to develop their apprenticeship programs. That's the title of my dissertation.
Mm.
What I did with my dissertation was to take the General Aptitude Test Battery, which is for adults, and standardize it for what the Germans have as people coming out of the 8th grade. They're 14 years of age or 15 years of age,
Okay.
and they have to learn a trade in the next 3 years. So these are the norms for a carpenter or plumber as an adult, but are they applicable to a child? So now they want someone to go into the Flint Public Schools and to develop a program for apprentices. Who's better qualified? Once again, oh, there's just drive, the job is yours. I drive to Flint, and the man was a little cool when I got out of the car.
Mm.
I just, I have all the papers you want to translate. I said, doctorates are in Latin. Do you want the Latin translation? And this is German. Do you want me to translate? He says, you have everything that I want and more than I could have hoped for. But you should not have applied. You're a Negro. Okay. Now, this is the point at which I lost what my parents had always told me, which was a meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
If you work hard, study, get good grades, now, of course, you have to be better than white people, you know. So, cum laude in a foreign language in a foreign country is better than indigenous people who don't get either that in their own country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of it was a point at which I began to realize that I did not understand white people. There was some difference between white people and black people, and I didn't understand what that was. So rather than to go to the physical things like, your educate or these socioeconomic things, the poor child, all these horrible things, I went to the mother science philosophy. And I was looking for the essence of ethnic difference. What essence is there that makes us different?
Okay.
And I relied on Hölder, who is a German philosopher, which said that in his system of thinking philosophically, that we come to different ethnic groups and identities based on where our ethnic group started. What was there at the very beginning in terms of how you survived and thrived for the next year? In addition to that, I took some information from Lambo, who was the first African that was trained in Western psychiatry, brilliant man, Yoruba um, from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about differences again between what he saw in Europeans and what he saw in Africans. And then I had my own ideas about it. So very quickly, I developed a value system which says, I find that Europeans, the highest value for them is in the object or the acquisition of the object.
Mm.
And the highest value for Blacks is the relationship. That if we see ourselves as equal, and I perceive, or you treat me as less than equal, you have treated me with disrespect, and that destroys the relationship.
Mm.
Now, Aretha Franklin tells you how powerful respect is in her song.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the two dependent variables in terms of how we see each other.
So one is based on conquest.
Yes, conquer the object, whatever it is. And it's not always material. It can be, something else, papers or whatever. But the object is the highest value. And how you get to it is nothing personal. You just have to acquire it. That's it.
Okay.
Now, what what you know what stabs me into the heart is now, after I get my doctorate, this is like 30 years later, my son leaves Morehouse to study in China, in Beijing.
Okay.
And he's doing quite well. He's doing school as well as he's doing commerce, trading things and so forth. And American companies want so many toilets. They want some, he can find them and have them shipped to him. Okay.
Mm. Yeah.
Now, the man that introduced him, he said he wanted to go to China, was a Chinese friend of mine, Sam Mock, who said, "Oh, I'll make sure that he gets to school in China." He said, "A friend is visiting me who is the director of education for China.
Mm.
Uh, why don't we come by and have dinner?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going out of town that day." He said, "Don't worry, I'll pick up Edwin and we'll have dinner." So within 2 weeks, Edwin was in the Chinese language school in Beijing.
Mm.
Okay. Now he's there. This is like the second year or something that he's there, and he's doing all these other things. The Citrus Association for grapefruit specifically
Mm-hmm.
has a white president, and this is in Florida. They want to sell grapefruits to China.
Okay.
It doesn't want pulp and all that. You could bring insects in. They want grapefruit juice. Now, at that time, every every place that would sell it didn't have reliable electricity, like reliable things to keep frozen things frozen. So Sam Mock gets a contract from Florida saying, "Would you please find out what is going on in China, what we can do?" So there are several American firms that undertake to do this. I need to clear my throat.
Sure.
As they do this, he says to Edwin, "Why don't you do the same thing? Since you know the country, you're there, you know the culture." All right. So now you have a retired white colonel from the army accompanying this president of the Citrus Association, white elderly male.
Mm-hmm.
So the two of them come, and Edwin takes them to all the other contractors' places where they talk about what they could do and what have you. And then Edwin talks about what he does. Now, the colonel, retired, was just awestruck with Edwin. He just said said he knows the culture, he knows the language, he knows what cities would have current and not current and the electricity and how you can develop freezing units. And he just went on, and he actually published in the local newspaper there in Florida pictures of Edwin and talking about how wonderful this young American was.
Mm.
not black, but just America now. We're all American.
Hmm.
And that was wonderful. Now, you would assume that in their best interest, they would use Edwin.
Right.
That's the assumption.
Right.
The president of the association said to Sam Mock, take the nigger off the project and we'll give you the project.
Hmm. Wow.
Now, rather than to make the money, this was the second thing that I learned.
Hmm.
He would rather go without no money than to give it to a nigger.
Wow. He would rather hurt himself.
Yes. Now, we just look, we have 10 states that don't have Obamacare. They're the poorest states in the union, and they have people they don't have a tooth in their head that meets. They have diabetes, everything you can imagine in their larger white populations than black population in those states, but in their own personal interest as white people, they would prefer not to have it because it's Obama. They're not even giving it the correct name.
Hmm.
Obamacare. So they don't want it.
Hmm.
So you see, I've learned two things. I've learned that there are differences, and I talk about that in the philosophical aspects of cultural difference. But even a stronger concept is that whites will do things against their own best interests just to block blacks from access.
Hmm.
That's very painful.
Yeah.
And of course, when this happened to my son, it was like a knife through my heart. It's extremely painful.
It's one
So,
thing to experience it yourself, but I know how that feels when someone denies something to your child simply because of the color of their skin. And that's the worst pain.
yeah,
I'd
yeah,
rather be punched in the face repeatedly than to see my child go through
yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I went through it all, but I'm preparing my boy. What's the biggest place that's going to be on our competition in the 21st century? China. He's fluent in the language, fluent in the culture,
Hmm.
but he's still black. There's something wrong with that picture.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. The V.
So, um, the volunteer, the V. Yeah. This is one of my favorites. And it's because when people learn with their head and they sift that what which they learn through their heart, then they have to do something with it, right? And so how do you do that? How do you exercise social responsibility? How do you give back? How do you volunteer to be part of the solution? I ask that of myself every single day. What am I going to do today with what I learn, with what I know, with who I know, with how I feel about them? How am I going to make life a little bit better for them? That's what drives me. So what is it that drives you? How do you exercise social responsibility other than you are one of the most giving human beings I've ever met? You have enriched so many of us with wisdom, with knowledge that has become wisdom. And to me, that is a great gift that you have given to humanity. But how do you see yourself and in your exercising of social responsibility?
Okay. I told you about typing my dissertation.
Yes.
I was excited. I had the first chapter ready and I took it to my instructor and he read it and he said, indeed, Herr Kollege Nichols, they don't call you not doctorate, so your colleague. Mhm. All of these words are German words, but this is not German. Okay.
Mm,
So I had to go back and work and work and work and work and work until it was the level of university level German.
mm,
You see what I'm saying?
yes.
So I know what it's like to be struggling with a dissertation, but my professor was helpful, not hindering. Very often with young Black men, we have them in the PhD program. They passed everything. They're not working on the dissertation. and someone keeps the dissertation on his desk 3 months and doesn't read it.
Mm.
Someone else picks at everything in it to a point that the young Black men say, the hell with it, I don't need it. And they become ABD, all but the dissertation.
Mm.
Get a PhD job with all but the dissertation. So in my house, there are more than 50 dissertations where I have said to those young Black men and sometimes young women, come spend a weekend here, come spend a week. I had one guy from Puerto Rico spend 2 weeks.
Mm.
My library is 10,000 volumes.
Wow.
It's classified with the Library of Congress classification on this, so we can find whatever, you can look it up and find whatever you want.
Mm.
They come and they'll spend time with me in my house physically. I'll cook for them. I cook. I enjoy cooking. And we spend hours sitting up here studying.
Mm.
So that when they leave here and take that piece of paper back with them, there's not a comma, there's not a period, there's not a quotation mark, there's not a reference, even to the italicized references in the index. That's my victory.
Wow.
I enjoy. And when they invite me to come as they march across the stage, when I can make it, I go. That's my volunteer. That's what I volunteer to do. The
Wow.
greatest satisfaction.
You're a man on a mission.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
That's extraordinary. I uh I wonder how many, you said about 50 people, how many of them do you stay in touch with on a
I have,
regular basis?
now I've helped others, uh, but I have 50 that I made sure they got through.
Oh, wow. That's an incredible contribution.
Yes, yes. I'm
Oh,
very
wow.
happy for it. Very happy.
Wow. But I'm even more impressed. I didn't think it was possible to be more impressed with you. I am now. That's quite a commitment. I think about how hard it is to get 15 or 20 minutes with a lot of people who call themselves leaders,
Mhm.
who don't make themselves accessible uh, to those who they should be helping.
Well,
And you
come
set the
here,
bar.
sit with Nichols, and we get it done.
Yeah.
We get it done.
Yeah.
That's
You,
one more that made it. That's my joy.
wow. All right. So I've got one more question for you. And this one is my favorite. My wife and I watch Lester Holt every night on the news. And so I always like to ask this question. If you knew this was going to be your last day on Earth, and Lester Holt from NBC News invited you to share one final message with the world to inspire people to be, as he says, be good to yourself and others, what would you say?
Okay, I'm going to read it to you so I don't miss anything. Okay, Mr. Holt, the 21st century is a globalized economy. Teams are the unit of production. We are competitive, and we're in competition with nations all over the world for jobs and products. Scott Page, University of Michigan, has said that the old homogeneous team, the all-white male team, is not as productive or creative as a heterogeneous team, males, females, blacks, whites, everyone together. Okay? Now, the United States is a multi-ethnic, pluralistic, and linguistically diverse society. So we've got everybody right here. Some countries only have Chinese, some of them only Indians, you see. We got everybody right here. So we have all the axiologies, all the epistemologies, all the logic sets are right here for
Mhm.
us to utilize. And every epistemology has its own way of solving problem solving. So if you have people with all those different ways of problem solving on the same team, how powerful is that team as opposed to just one way of solving problems?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so if the United States does not get its act together, and stop fighting about race and class and caste, we will become a third-class world power.
Mm.
My question is, do you think the Chinese give a damn about white privilege? You're not Chinese, so you're nothing.
Huh.
China's long-term goals for their projects, long-term, 50 years, and it's already funded. It's not pending, it's funded for 50 years.
Mm.
Short-term, 5 years, funded. And what do we have here in the United States? We're still passing continuing resolutions.
Mm.
And they give you the money in June, and you got to spend it before the end of August. How much planning can you do for a unit, a section, in terms of a program?
Not
And if you
much.
don't spend it down the amount you get next year.
Mm.
So you have all these contracts coming that have nothing to do with anything at the end of the year. I just got to get rid of this money. So what have you accomplished?
Not much.
Okay, so I'm saying my word to Mr. Holt, we have all the opportunities and the chance. But once again, we're cutting our nose off to spite our face,
Mm.
dealing with race and gender and all these things that are of no relevance at all when we look at the rest of the world. They have no purpose whatsoever. And we're destroying all of the creative powers that we have, fighting each other over what?
The conquest.
The conquest, the object.
Mhm.
I have the object.
The shiny object.
Yes,
We have it all here except for common sense, don't we?
that's it. We're cutting the nose off to spite the face.
Hmm. Well, I hope Lester Holt watches this one day and gives you a call and wants to share more with the world because my reach is limited. But
It's okay.
these
It's
words that you shared with me today need to be universal.
well, it will go out to those who need it.
Yes, sir.
Those are the people that you're reaching.
That's right. That's right. Dr. Nichols, my friend, it has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself and a whole lot of great wisdom with the world today on Profiles of Love.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.